Thank you, and thank you, Cathaoirleach, and I'd also like to join in congratulating Minister on her new role, and I look forward to engaging with her actively on the many, many dimensions of her new role. Usually when I speak on Europe, at Europe Day, or when I'm speaking in European events, I talk about the extraordinary benefits and indeed how important it was for Ireland to be part of Europe. And I talk about the progressive laws that we had, and the progress we saw in areas of environment, of employment law and gender equality, and how effective it has been to have established new pressures and new norms that press European countries to raise their standards in all of these areas, and how effective and important that's been for Ireland. And I also talk about the future of Europe, and I was very proud to be one of 4 Irish parliamentarians who took part in the Future of Europe process. And I may return to speak about that at the end of the speech, but today, and I have to agree with the former speaker, today I believe when we talk about European Day, I think Europe Day, we need to look, I think, back to the bigger question, not just of Ireland and its engagement, but the big question of why the European Union was important when it came into existence, and what the context was, and what the history was. And that's why we have really crucial thoughts and decisions that we need to be making around Europe's future, if it is to have a future. So the European Union was really important because it came from a bloody and brutal history. Sometimes that gets forgotten, I think, when we talk about Europe. Europe's history is bloody and brutal, not just in terms of wars. The 100-year War, the 30-year War, World War I and the extraordinary loss of life, World War II with its horrors and the Holocaust. This is the history of Europe. And that is not the only part of Europe's bloody history, because also there is blood in Europe's history of colonialism. The 10 million dead in the Belgian Congo, the transatlantic slave trade, 12.5 African loaded onto Atlantic slave ships, the German genocide in Namibia, the over 500,000 from approximately 3 million Algerians who were killed by France. This is Europe's history. And people talked about feeling a bit ashamed if you don't have the same, armies or the same. There's a lot actually to feel ashamed about. But what there also is then is a lot to be proud of. And crucially, something to be proud of was the massive shift following the horrors of World War II, which we saw towards multilateralism on the UN level and at a European level. And crucially, multilateralism that put humanity first and that advocated a politics of principle, even where that does not suit the politics of big powers or the politics of interests. And that's really crucially important. So looking at the coal and steel, the founding documents, being really clear why this impetus was. It wasn't let's just make money from coal and steel. It was the pooling of coal and steel production will change the destinies of those regions which have long been devoted to the manufacture of munitions of war, of which they have been the most constant victims. The entire project of the European Union was a shift away from war. And it happened at the same time as the United Nations, in its very first founding treaty, in the preamble, that first line, which is the duty to protect succeeding generations from the scourge of war. And I think we're really at a frightening moment if, given that history of the European Union, and given that the greatest gift it has given has been that peace, has been that stability, that we now have narratives about rearmament. We have Ursula von der Leyen really talking about the need to have rearmament, to have new defence projects. Projects indeed that would be around common European interests, not about principles, not about international law, but about European interests. We had a period of time where interests and military might determined and shaped our global politics. And it was hard won to move away from it. And we also have attempts, the Horizon funding was mentioned, attempts and proposals from the European Commission, which I hope have been properly pushed back because they've been widely rejected by civil society right across Europe, but proposals that maybe the Horizon funding, that civil funding for research and innovation that is meant to drive our collective response in areas like the huge existential threat of climate change, the need for social cohesion, the need for medical advances, that perhaps that might get blended with the defence fund and get rerouted into the absolutely bottomless, greedy pit, which is the military-industrial complex and its research demands and preferences. Bear in mind again, the actual founding was moving away from munitions. And the idea, well, it's different because we have to look to, we're in an unstable, it was an unstable political environment in the 1940s and 50s. And it is precisely the recognition that Ireland had, and that is why Ireland managed to drive the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, was that it is a myth that when you have an arms race, that's what keeps people safe. It is actually when you center power towards principles and when you apply them, and what neutrality means, by the way, it's not doing anything, or it's not which side are you on or you're not. What neutrality means is that you take principles such as international law and you apply them equally to everyone. Not because they're your trading partner or your neighbour, such as Ukraine, but because they are international principles that we've agreed in terms of humanity. And that is why the failure of the European Union to take any meaningful action in respect of Gaza is absolutely destroying European credibility internationally. The fact that we have in the association agreement trading interests and profiteering still happening. When Europe, as 25% of Israel's trading partner, has an incredibly strong tool that has not been used at a time when we see a ground invasion threatening 600,000 children in Rafah. It's not even being spoken about. Instead, we're having conversation about rearmament. And the idea, well, we'll just keep it from our borders. As if that's the solution when we have policies that create death and when we have climate policies that are driving desertification, when we have financial interests that are indeed contributing to conflict, as we've seen in Libya and elsewhere. And that is another place for Europe, and we talk about European values, but Europe has to really try to say, what are those values? And I believe that European citizens believe in European values. When I took part in the Future of Europe process, I was struck by citizens from Greece, from France, from Spain. They talked about the same things. They talked about equality. They talked about their goal of how children would be treated. They talked about education. They talked about common values. And they talked about the European Charter of Fundamental Rights and how they feel that it should be applying to everyone around the world. But European citizens talked about, we want Europe to be good. But what we're hearing politically is, oh, so you want Europe to be strong and Europe to win in a new bad return to the old power politics of big powers, of patronage, of interests. And that's not what the citizens were saying. They want a Europe that they can actually be proud of. And that's not a Europe that lets hundreds of thousands, 27,000, drown in the Mediterranean since 2014. Where the Adriana disaster just last year, where 600 migrants drowned, was seen as nobody's responsibility. Because, and this is something we heard about, that one of the people I've spoken to who have left the Irish Navy left after the Irish Navy stopped performing search and rescue because their hearts were broken not to be able to take part in saving lives anymore. And so I believe in Europe. I'm passionate about Europe. And yes, we can't blame things on Brussels. We need to take responsibility for Europe's future. And Ireland as a neutral country, within, I think it was very well put, there are different histories, there are different perspectives. Ireland as a neutral country that can speak to international law, that can remind Europe of the peace project and champion the idea of peace, and that can be a link between Europe and the wider world, including those many parts of the wider world who have suffered historically from Europe. Ireland has an incredibly important moral role to play right now to ensure that we have a European future that we can all be proud of and which genuinely represents values and not just interests. Thank you.